Hello, everyone, and welcome back. I'd just like to take a moment to thank all of our sponsors that made the event possible. And now is as good a time as any to promote our Messaging and SMS World event, taking place on the 19th to the 20th of June in London. So we hope to see you there. So to kick things off, I'd like to welcome to the stage James Williams from MEF to give some sort of opening remarks and background to the industry.
Thank you very much. Hello, everyone, and a very warm welcome here to ITW 2023. Some of you I know. I'm looking here out at the audience, and I'm aware this is going to be online and recorded for posterity's sake. Some of you I don't know. So my name is James. I've been in the telecoms industry since I've been 19 years old. So this is actually my 31st year in telecoms. I've been in the messaging business for a very, very long time, and I've had the pleasure of working with a number of people in the audience, including the moderator of our first panel discussion coming up, Mr. Paul Ruppert, before as well. So that's me, but what about the organization I work for, the Mobile Ecosystem Forum? There are multiple MEFs. If you type MEF into Google, you will come up with the Malaysian Executives Forum. Many of you here in the USA will also be very familiar with the Metro Ethernet Forum, or what was originally the Metro Ethernet Forum. And last year was my first year ever at ITW. I've been to so many trade fairs over the years, but never ITW, and last year was my first time. And I was staying here, and my hotel room was 2 doors away from the other MEF's meeting room, which of course was one of the converted bedrooms. So I had the pleasure of introducing myself as MEF and being responded to and answered by, we're MEF as well. But there we are. It's a funny story, and it's a bit strange. They started off about 3 weeks after us, I think. But it all goes to show that the world of mobile is vast, and it's growing, and the influence of business messaging is growing as well. Now, the Mobile Ecosystem Forum is a not-for-profit neutral trade body. We have the pleasure of working very, very closely with organizations like Capacity Media, who've put this on, and it was great working with James Netherwood, the conference producer, and I worked with him, James is here, and I worked with him to put the session you will be seeing now, the 4 panel discussions coming up together. So that partnership is absolutely fantastic. As I mentioned, over 200 members, and about 70% of members are part of MEF because of messaging in simple language. Now, messaging encompasses many, many different channels. And if you look at statistics from the likes of Mobile Squared, Juniper Research, and many other research houses, if you actually look at the channels really being used out there, you will actually find that when it comes to businesses, the sheer volume and number of transactions businesses use to communicate with us is actually email is still #1, believe it or not, even though the conversion rate, the read rate of emails is exceedingly low. If someone is able to get us to read 25% of our emails, they're doing very, very well. But email is still the single largest channel. When you move to SMS, business SMS I'm talking about, what we call application-to-person SMS text messaging, and you add in chat apps, the likes of WhatsApp and Viber business messaging and things like that, then that combined in terms of transactions, in terms of transaction volumes, is bigger than email. But it's clear to see that the influence of text messaging, and I'm very clear with my definition of text messaging, my personal definition of text messaging is SMS plus chat apps, not just SMS. So I'll be very, very clear with that this afternoon when I'm moderating panels as well. It's my personal take on it. Because chat apps are increasingly having a dominant role when it comes to particular use cases. Now, within MEF, and I'm pleased to say many of the people in the audience are MEF, many of the people attending the conference today are MEF members, whether it be operators, business messaging companies, or indeed enterprises too, they too are seeing this change. But at the end of the day, all said and done, what is making the profit that sustains so many of these messaging companies? The answer is very simple. It's still SMS. Now, looking at the audience, I can see some of you will have been in the industry for more than a few years, some 10, 20, 30 years like myself. Will have experienced the times where people have said, oh, MMS is going to replace SMS. You remember that? MMS is going to replace SMS. No, it didn't, for a variety of reasons. And then a decade ago, RCS came along. RCS is going to replace SMS. No, it didn't. So I think my final point before we get into the panel discussions, and my final takeaway for all of us is, let's just stop talking about this one channel is going to replace another channel or anything like that. Every channel has a role to play in the business messaging mix. Whether it's email, whether it's traditional voice, whether it's voice over IP, whether it's an enterprise with their own app and push messaging, or chat apps, or anything like that, RCS, WhatsApp, anything. Every single one has a role to play. And at the end of the day, business messaging can, if used properly, be super effective. But in order for it to be effective, it has to reach the right audience. And with so many transactions having moved online, we need to be very sure that the organizations interacting with individuals like you and I, the organizations we buy goods and services from, they need to be sure that we are who we say we are. The know your customer element is important. But trust, folks, goes two ways. We, as consumers, also want to know that the messaging we are receiving, the interactions we are receiving from brands, generally are being received from, generally are coming from those brands and are not spam or fake or fictitious. Because unfortunately, and we're going to be hearing about that later, the world of fraud is on the up. But now, let's move to our first panel discussion. I'd like to introduce Mr. Paul Ruppert to the stage, and Paul will be moderating the first discussion. Paul, welcome.
I'd like to invite the panel members, who are far more important than the moderator, to come up. Thanks for the handoff, James, and welcome everybody. And I didn't know that I would be separated from the panel. I'm sorry, there's a mic there? Okay. Much better. Everybody hear me? Excellent. All right, so what we're here for today is to talk about identity verification and the industry that's surrounding that and the dynamics that are pushing that market. The importance of secure identity in the mobile communications ecosystem cannot be overemphasized. In today's digital age, identity verification is critical to protecting against fraud and ensuring user privacy. Yet this cuts both ways. Consumers are looking for trust in brands and enterprises to verify who they say they are with confidence and security. On the other side of the coin, enterprises are also seeking protection against threats, fraud, and bad acting individuals. Both sides are seeking a way to navigate across what seems to be a growing wilderness of mirrors. We have the chance today to discuss this evolving market with three experts who can simplify some of the complexities of what is identity, how to verify it, how should such data be held, by who, and even the emerging potential or disruption of consumers managing this through self-sovereign identity and the use of emerging technologies such as blockchain. So I'm going to dispense with the formalities of how our past got us here this afternoon, and instead would each of you tell us what your company does in the identity verification segment and what you do at your company. I'll start off with Rebecca Johnson from Numerical.
Hi, Rebecca Johnson, founder and CEO of Numerical, and we are at our core an identity company focused on KYC processes to identify businesses. We are not consumer-based. So we verify businesses and then associate their identity to the telephone numbers that they are using to deliver outbound communications and deliver that to analytics that are making decisions on what to present to consumers about the call.
Guillaume?
Hi, everybody. Guillaume Bourcy. I'm a founder of UFT Advisory that is specifically focusing on mobile identity, and I'm also co-founder and chief innovation officer at Enable, which is a platform as a service, providing services to telco around mobile identity and also communication.
Jussi?
Yeah, hello everyone. My name is Jussi Mäkelä and I am the COO of a company called CodeB. We're a relatively new company, a startup, but our background in technology goes back from the founder's side 20 odd years. And what we are really focusing on is decentralized systems that enable, most importantly, various kinds of cross-organizational processes to be automated. And at the core of all of this, and at the core of our background as well, is obviously identity. So we have developed our own SSI platforms, but obviously something that could all be used in standardized form. But it is very much in the kind of identity and how can you verify and securely confirm what those identities are and how you can then build those into whatever the business processes that the future needs.
Thank you. Guillaume, I'm going to ask you to kind of start off with the first discussion point, which is identity seems to be in flux at the moment. And so that drives the question of who should be responsible for identity verification, whether it is brand identity for an enterprise or consumer identity or both.
So according to fraudsters, that should be the consumer, you and I. But it's a very tough topic to address. There is different models, especially if you look at consumer identities, especially if you look at the initiative across the different regions. There is no real self-sovereign identities that resolve for that. But there is additional, I see you smiling at it, but.
That's an opportunity whenever but comes up, right?
Exactly, this is an opportunity. We have seen a lot of interesting consortium activities between government, telecom companies, and even enterprises like banks that are teaming up together, for example, to give the users one identity to use across multiple layers of different services. So that's the first one that is pretty interesting. I'm thinking about my home country, and It's Me, and not me, but It's Me as a brand, has been doing that pretty successfully with 80% adoption rate as the adult population in Belgium. So that kind of initiative is pretty interesting, but telcos are playing an important role there as enablers because the phone numbers, for example, is a pretty critical point there into that identification.
I was going to say, kind of from my viewpoint, identity is not a new concept. Identity has been around since humans have been around. Whether it's on a piece of paper, it's a ring with a wax seal, right? Like there's this identity concept that has always been around. Where we're at today is how do we deliver the identity in a trustworthy, secure manner through whatever channel we need to deliver identity. So specifically for telecom, it is about how do we associate an identity. I focus on businesses, not in the consumer space, but how do we associate that identity to a voice, to a message, to a email? Guess what? Those are all three different communication channels, different protocols, different standards. So I think this is part of the challenge is, especially if we do like self-sovereign identity, are we going to force that down all these different channels, or do we as identity providers find a way to adapt to deliver identity in whatever form it needs to through the channels?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I agree with all of that. And from my side as well, the important thing is that it kind of depends who verifies an identity. Well, it depends on the circumstances. So, if you need to know that that my name is what I am, you probably, that would be maybe a government agency that would do that. If you need to understand you're a bank and you want to lend me some money, you probably need to know from an employer that whether I actually have, or from a bank that whether I actually have monies and all that. So you will end up with the different layers, the same as real identities. Identities are different layers of our past and connections and so forth. And the challenge is that how do we link that into a, let's say, in a business or in a digital environment when we do that? Because at the moment, it is so easy. Nobody is really asking you to verify anything, and you can claim to be, you might have a blue tick in Twitter or something like that if you pay them $8 or all that. But what's the value of that, and how can you do that? The verification in a way that you can trust that is with the right level of security, right level of immutability, and all that, and also protecting privacy of that. So there's the question of who provides that, how can you secure that, and also how do you deliver that information that it doesn't mean that I will have to show you my whole life if you just need to know whether I'm over 21 or not.
Right, so then to that point, you're discussing how much is really necessary for identity verification to be secure and authentic versus how much more you need to gild the lily, if you will. So I'll ask a more pressing question, which is, are we expecting too much for authentication when today we have a fair amount of authentication that occurs, whether it's the telephone number, the IMSI, the account, as well as all the other aspects and the various entities that, let's say, patrol identity at the moment, as opposed to it being 100% secure? Are we over-hardening this issue because of the nature of identity being so important? Is that possible? Is that too much, is what I'm asking?
I don't know from my side, is it necessarily. I think it's also the question of what are the elements of identity or the verifiable credentials and how secure those credentials are. And this is part of the problem, like if we take it back to the issue of fraud, is that everybody's focused on the telephone numbers, which was relevant when there was basically government organizations, government agencies who were the only authority that could assign a telephone number, so you could kind of trust it. Now that doesn't hold anymore with number portability and all that, and with free competition. So we need to move away. Maybe it's the mobile number, or like the telephone number itself, CLI, sender ID, whatever that might be. It's not sufficient anymore. The good thing is that there is ways of going about that, and they are standards very far advanced. They are open ID verifiable credentials, and you have all of these sort of things that you can utilize. But nevertheless, it's a kind of question of that maybe this what we used to use as some sort of a element of identity is not usable anymore.
Guillaume?
Yeah, I think authentication verification is extremely important, and we don't do enough today. I think you're right. There is not one channel. I'm very inclined to say that the phone number is still a very solid identifiers, because how many times have you changed your phone numbers in the last 10, 20 years? Right? Emails? I have 5 or 6 emails at least, from what I know or remember. But so that's why you need to have solid identifiers and being able to have a good mix of verification across different channels. So we go to one type of channel to an omni-channel verification, depending on your identifiers you're going to use. And I have seen that when I was in my time on building product for Fortune 500 in terms of authentication, that you don't have one single global ubiquitous answer in all markets. Each market is different. Unfortunately for us, it means more, or fortunately for us also as an industry, it means very complex depending each market. So if you are looking how fragmented each market it is, you're going to have different solution for each of them. Why do we have authentication over SMS today? It's ubiquitous. There is absolutely, it's agnostic of your device, smartphone, feature phone, it works. Is it good? I will not answer that today, but we should change that, definitely, but what can replace it?
And Paul, I want to answer your question of, is it too much? And I'm going to pick up what Jussi said is, okay, Twitter. That's the wonderful example of not enough. It was a telephone number, a credit card, and a name, like 3 little components, and you got a blue check mark. Devastating. At a financial level for public companies, when someone opens a Twitter account, gets the blue check mark with this public company's name, starts to make some statements, and their stock price tanks. So identity has an ROI right now. Businesses need to protect their identity from a financial perspective. So what I think the challenge is, kind of back to what I was stating, is getting the identity, raising the bar on the verification and vetting of it. That's totally separate from using the OpenAI or ID and Carry or whatever it is, whatever one you want to pick. So self-sovereign, doesn't matter. The vetting aspect of it remains the same. How you store, access, and deliver the identity, that's where the standards can come into play. And I am of the mindset that we shouldn't care. We should adopt. If you're an identity provider, you should be able to capture and encapsulate that identity and deliver it in whatever manner it needs to be delivered so that it can be leveraged, the one identity, via voice, messaging, email, and social. That's my view of the world, how I'd like to see it. But I think what we're doing is putting a lot of pressure on the channel, like 10DLC. Everything in the channel has to do the verification process. It's just a cluster, you know what. So I think we need to learn from some lessons. I agree with you on, I'm saying what you don't want to say.
Thank you.
So I think that's what we need to be focused on. And I know the panelists here are experts in that area. And that's what we hope you can take away is really start to think about what does identity really mean? What are the challenges? Am I doing the right fight to get identity delivered? Or should I step back and reassess?
So imagine, if you will, you're not in front of an audience today at a conference. It's Tuesday afternoon in your offices. Based on what you've just said, what are you working on right now?
Zero trust architecture for the voice channel. Literally, that is what I'm doing, and I believe in it.
Consortium, building consortium for identities and multi-channel identity verification.
And for us, it is a design of the actual framework and the protocols of like how you can link separate isolated systems, what you would have between organizations, that you can automate the processes that are needed to do. And the tools for that are things like APIs or whatever you do in terms of like to enable the integration, but then that also, you need that link to the identities and ensure that you are doing, you are doing the business you're supposed to be doing, that you're allowed to do with the people that you think that, you know that who they are. So it is all about designing those kind of applications.
So what you've described is an ecosystem, an operating ecosystem that is multi-layered and multifaceted at the moment, with different types of technologies, with different types of business cultures, based on national boundaries or regional boundaries, as well as the emerging technical elements to try to integrate all of these things. So given that, and my next question is based on being a sales guy in my career, my past career, I guess. And I always operated on 6-month to 3-year lifespan, roadmap ahead of me. And so given that, and all the moving parts that seem to be integral or a gating item to your completion of the goal, to your offering, a concrete offering tomorrow or a month from now, 6 months from now, what are you focusing on primarily within the ecosystem, and what needs to be accomplished within the ecosystem?
In the voice channel, specifically leveraging Stir Shaken to make it mean something. Right now, it's just a dumb pipe. That's essentially what Stir Shaken is.
Agreed.
Yay, we all checked off the box. The government said we did this. The FCC gets to say we did an impact. Yet we still have robocalls. One of my employees was sitting next to me, got a phishing scam pretending to be me. And I'm like, for the love. I'm the one that knows how to solve this problem. And it's like, here it is, I can't even stop it. So for the today, it is getting stir shaken to actually have an end-to-end verification. That means the entity that is originating the call, their identity is verified, it's vetted, it's associated with their call by their OSP, the originating service provider. That information is delivered down to the terminating service provider, and they actually do something with the data that's delivered to them. We do have RCD information, header information that can be used. How do we get to that level of an A-level attestation? Actually means something. Right now, people sell A-level attestations, so it's garbage. The entire ecosystem, there are participants out here in their exhibits that are contributing to the fraud because they don't want to implement the actual KYC for knowing who their customer is. So that's my job, is to call that out, and I will continue to do that. And then the next level is just to push this down to messaging. Messaging is a bit of a challenge with a campaign registry, and then with pushing data down to net number. Look, guys, we're smart people. This is just data. We can get a man to the moon with science and physics and math. I think that we can solve this problem with the distribution of data in a secure manner. So I'm a little bit passionate about it. Just
Indeed. Good.
I think on my side, what I've seen, the first thing, even going there, and I totally agree with you, I love that vision, it's the data privacy, because here in the US, indeed, you start to have some concern about it and so on, but in Europe, it's been a discussion for a long time. And the problem of EU is that they plan the data privacy even before there was a product. So, but what it should look like overall, from a global perspective, how do we deal with PII? How do we deal with anonymization of the data and respect? So, not being intrusive in identifying the user, but also keeping still a balance to know enough about that users. So that is really a big, big challenge. And for me, that's certainly the first one we need to address. And then mobile operators are certainly a big, big role to play there, because they have a lot of data around the users. And should they be able to better utilize this data within the law, within the data privacy and policies, that would help a lot of people, including us as consumers, but also enterprises, to better make sense of these data, use them, and authenticate the users and the enterprises and others entities using them. So I think there is a lot of things to be done first on that ground before even moving further. But that's because it's really a big headache at this time.
For us, the focus is really on the educational piece of trying to, especially around the communication industry, to see this as a business opportunity to change the way and the structure a little bit how data flows work, because the systems that you need to create in order to, for instance, automate some things like, let's say, in the data traffic, the systems that you need to do to automate the query, the quoting, the provisioning, all of these kind of elements, you need exactly the same building blocks that will then enable you to also verify the traffic that's coming on another business from those companies, so that you can make sure that that is clean in the same way as you give access to them or they give access to you in order to automatically procure something. Is the same principle that you can apply also in fraud management. And there, obviously, the identity is absolutely fundamentally key, because you need to know, even at the machine level, that this machine is actually part of that organization and it has rights to do that. But they are exactly the same thing, and from that comes benefit, not only new business opportunities that you have, like new products offerings you can do, and all of these, but you could almost say that there is a side effect, is the fact that you can start eliminating this unwanted element of the industry, such as fraudulent traffic that goes on, because at the moment nobody can identify that, which is a big problem.
I was going to say, I'd like to pick up on what you were talking about, because you introduced privacy to the conversation.
Yes.
So I think that is something that, at least in the United States, we are horrifically deploying state-level privacy laws, which makes it almost impossible to comply. How do we know who we're communicating with on voice? What state are they in? What state am I in? Is this individual like me, I've got a cell phone number from Louisiana, but I live in Virginia. it's so complicated to apply any kind of privacy rules to communications because it's so fluid and dynamic, which I'm wondering, where your success is over in the EU, it's a little bit more comprehensive as opposed to sectoral in the US. So I was just kind of curious if you had thoughts on that with regards to implementing a solution for consumer identity in the US versus other areas where I think the state might end up being a challenge.
Yeah, well, and I have the feeling that in the US sometimes you have companies that want to really follow and abide by the rules and are doing that really well, while others are saying just, we'll see later. And that's still a big problem because there is no consensus on how you need to do it. So I think one of the way to do that, especially on the voice side and on the messaging side, there is certainly ways to anonymize a lot of the information, but still have the telco in that perspective responsible for the identification, or at least the certification, like Steven Shaken was originally planned, but in a much more deep manner, but still having this access to a lot of information that can provide you further information on the user if needed, because not everything is about the same use cases. So depending on the use cases you're going to need more information. And can you release them? Yes. So you need to have this information on your fingertip. And the mobile operators in that case should have in place some governance, orchestration about the use cases and how they pass you the information to additional vendors or to any other who are terminating these calls or SMSs. So that's more orchestration on data governance.
You said governance, and that's what we're missing.
Exactly.
Right.
Have a comment? No?
No, I think that it is true that in Europe you have, like with the GDPR and all that, and I think that there's also a little bit more when it comes to defining for like self-sovereign identities. There's like the EPSI projects and all that that are actually defined and to some extent have the sort of the governance in place in the sense that who are those authorities, organizations who can provide things like university degrees, and how can you actually work on what standard would you use in order for you to present your degree to a prospective employer, for instance. So there's perhaps a little bit more of that's kind of like a cohesion that's going in there. But it's also, as an industry, the truth is that you will probably need to, this is an international industry as well, you need to be able to operate and create the systems and the technologies to operate in a number of different regulatory environments and all of that. So, but that's an engineering problem, and the engineers will, Guillaume will sort that out.
I love it. That's an engineering problem.
One day.
Cover that over.
It's never.
Don't look behind the curtain.
Yeah, but it's never. It's very easy to go to the sort of technology saying it's like, we can't do this because we don't know the technology. No, the technology we can figure it out, and we have figured it out. It is about. It's a business decision. How do we actually want to do that? Which is maybe that's the element of the governance.
Yes.
So it's a business decision, and I'm going to pause for 1 second. Are there any questions from the audience? We've got about 4 minutes left, so I just want to throw it out there if anybody has a question. All right, moving on. Since it is a business decision, if you will, who are you actually selling into in an organization relative to your value proposition at the moment? And given all the complexities, as well as the open-ended questions, the big open-ended questions that you've just identified, who is it that you're targeting as the ideal target for your pitch?
For numerical, and this was a lesson that I learned, I love identity, and I thought everybody else would love identity, so I try to go to businesses and talk about identity, and they're like, I don't have an identity problem, but my calls are being labeled fraud or spam by the carrier. And I'm like, but that is an identity problem. So lesson learned for me was quit talking about identity if you want to sell identity. Once I learned and understood, like, oh, they have a problem, they don't understand its identity, I will just talk to them about what their problem is. I can remove the fraud and spam from your calls. Great, that's a solution. It wasn't until about a year or so into this process that our customers started to understand they had an identity, and the aha moment was when they came back to Numerical and said, I got an identity problem on 10DLC, can you help me? And then I'm like, here we go. Now we are starting to have an educated market that understands that they want control over their identity and what the terminating side will say or do about their identity, whether it's throttling their messaging or it's putting up a fraud or misleading label. Businesses want control over how they're presented. They will pay for that because there is an absolute ROI associated with it. So that's my approach to the market, backing into the identity eventually.
I think on my side, I've seen in my career the one that makes the most sense from where I was positioned, the growth manager, people in charge of growth. Why that? Because actually these are the ones who are onboarding fake identities, fake users today. What is their cost of acquisition? Super high. Depends on the countries, but this is high. To have just bots on your platform, yeah, not a real good business model, right? So the growth managers, they want the real user that's going to spend the money on their platform. This is what they want. So for me, these are the people that where in an organization, identity should matter the most for the consumer identity, obviously. So these are the people, the growth manager, VP of growth, or acceleration of growth, name them how you want. I lost track of all the titles there. But yeah, these are the people you want to address.
I think from our side, it's one of the which makes it somewhat of a challenging is that because it's also at the intersection with so many. So it's very easy. You can say like, your strategic people are obviously core of that because it's a sort of like looking at the forward and the future opportunities and all that. Unfortunately, in real life, it's often the short term that wins over the long term. So then you end up with your operational, with your technical, and convincing them that there's an opportunity. And of course, there's going to be there needs to be really some kind of internal product sponsor that can see the value really on it. Of course, you can put it the other way and you have the compliance and it's a sort of, because of regulator pressure and all that sort of thing, there's an element in there as well. But I think that, in order to create a, really successful environment, it needs to be more of a kind of opportunity driven rather than, cost and risk and penalty driven discussion.
Indeed. Well, we've hit our time limit and I don't want to put everyone late for the rest of the afternoon, but Rebecca, Guillaume, Jussi, thank you very much. Put your hand together for their comments today, and thank you very much for attending.
Thank you.
Thank you to Paul and all the panelists. We will now go on to a related session on security and messaging. We're just going to have 1 minute just to rearrange the stage, and then please stay with us. Thank you.